Hello and welcome to my Allo Mother podcast. I'm your host, Celeste Smith. This podcast is focused on educating and helping mothers navigate our fast-moving and transitory lifestyle, looking through the lens of anthropology. I am a maternal anthropologist on a mission to support mothers around the world because, let's face it, we weren't meant to do this alone. Hello everyone, welcome to our podcast episode today. I'm so excited to introduce you to my friend Valerie. We go way back to elementary school and her friendship has been a light in my life for many years. And I seem to have kind of followed in her footsteps with our shared experience of living in France and, serving missions there, doing bachelor's degrees and supporting our husbands through master's degrees and medical school. So yeah, I'm so excited to dive in today. So thank you, Valerie, for your time today, for coming.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so excited. So just go ahead and introduce you and your family and tell us about your motherhood journey.
Okay. Well, first off, I want to thank you for inviting me to be on it. And you're so sweet to say that you, admire and look up to me. I have so many fond memories we've known each other since we were little girls. And I was always amazed by the adventures that you had with your family and everything that you accomplished. And it was fun that we kind of followed similar paths. So,
Yeah.
I guess I'll just share. So my name's Valerie Finley. We currently live in Washington, D.C., and we are moving this summer to Pearl Harbor because my husband is a doctor for the Navy. So we move around a lot. This will be our sixth move, so seventh location in almost 11 years of marriage. And we have 5 kids. Our oldest just turned 10, and our youngest is 3. And then we have 2 7, almost 8-year-olds and a 5-year-old. And 2 of our children were adopted through the foster system. That's our 7 and 5-year-old sons. And anyway, I just feel so lucky to be a mom to all of them. And when Joey was our oldest, when he was born, I still had a year left of school.
Okay.
And I finished up my bachelor's in special education. And so that was a really busy and hard time, but it was also a very rewarding time because I realized that I could do hard things. And so walking across that stage together with my husband and with our son felt like a great accomplishment. And then after that, we moved to California because my husband applied to medical school but didn't get in the first time. Okay. And so we were pretty bummed and didn't know what to do. But then he had this offer for a new master's program that was opening up at UC Riverside. So we went and lived there with his parents. And it turned out to be a blessing because during that time I was able to actually use my degree, and I taught full time in a special ed class, kindergarten through 2nd graders. And then when we had our second baby, I decided to stay at home. And during that time, Evan did get into medical school. Okay. So then when he started medical school, we had 2. And his last year of medical school is when we got our 2 foster sons. And 2 weeks after we got our foster sons, I gave birth to our 3rd child. So we went from 2 to 5 kids in a matter of 2 weeks during COVID, during the 4th year of medical school. So it was a busy time.
Oh my goodness. What a story. Wow. So I'm speechless. So let's just go back to, this is amazing. So let's see. So you finished. Yeah. So when you finished that year of your schooling,
Mm-hmm.
that last year when you had a baby, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So how did you manage going to classes and have a baby too?
That's a good question. So I reached out to, when I found out I was pregnant, I immediately told all my professors because in my program, they had said, do not get pregnant. And it was like, whoops, already done that. So I immediately reached out to them and said like, okay, you know, I might have to make some changes with when I'm going to student teach and
Oh,
where I'm going to do it, as well as when I can take classes. So I had very understanding and accommodating professors, especially since I was proactive. I think they appreciated that I
nice.
was doing something about it rather than waiting on them. So I remember when Joey was born, I was in the hospital and I zoomed into one of my classes, and back then it was Skype, right?
Oh,
Um,
yeah.
and my professor had said like, yeah, it's like I'll make sure you don't miss class and that you still get counted for attendance, but that's up to you to set that up. So I reached out to other classmates who were willing to help me with that. And I did that for the first 3 weeks after he was born. And then after 3 weeks, I went back to school. And uh, then I had my practicum. So I really reached out to my church community and found some people who were willing to take Joey when I had to go teach during the summertime. And
Okay.
then when I went back to classes full time in the fall, he was a few months old. And um, depending on the class, if it's a big class, some of my classes were big, you know, in an auditorium. Those professors had no problem with me bringing Joey. And
Wow.
he was such a quiet baby too, so it was helpful. And people loved passing him around the classroom. He was kind of the class mascot.
Oh,
So he was around adults a lot, and we used to say that he lived on campus his first year of life because, and my husband and I would play. Um, oh my goodness, I missed the word, but we would
tag
juggle him
team.
back and forth, and so between classes, one of us would take Joey, and um, or if we had a class we could take him to, we would take him with us, and if not, then I would sometimes post on Facebook and say, hey, like my babysitter fell through. Is there anyone available? And there was always a friend or someone willing to take Joey for me. So that was huge.
Wow, it's really a leap of faith to just keep going because it's easy to just be like, you know what, I have a baby. I don't
Hmm.
know how I'm going to manage, you know?
Yeah. Well, and I did have people who told me, like, you're a mom now. That's your job. Just stay at home. Quit.
Oh,
And I thought, I'm not going to quit. I'm so close to finishing. And this is
right.
something I want to do. Why would I throw that all away? So,
Yeah. So because you're proactive and you pursued it, it worked out, right?
yeah. And I found a teacher that I had um, observed a few times who happened to
Oh,
be at an elementary school just down the street from where we lived. So I approached him and I said, hey, could I be your student teacher this next year? Because we only had one car and I knew it was going to be hard to figure out, schedules. And he at first was hesitant, but then as he got to know me better, he was willing, and we had a great experience together teaching. And it was really helpful to be able to just walk down the street to go to school each day to teach.
wow. That is so great. But I love that vision of just all those people rallying to help you, but you had to ask. You
Hmm.
know, it really
Yeah.
takes like not just being proactive, but being willing to say like, I'd love to be with my baby, but they'll be fine. You know, they'll be
Hmm.
fine being
Yeah.
watched on and off.
Yeah. And I'll say Joey is very social.
That
Yeah.
is
So
great.
I
So that
don't think
makes
it
sense.
hurt him.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. So with like at the beginning, being able to have your husband be such a good allo parent too.
Mhm.
Um, with you working together, did that was that a good foundation for the years that followed as you progressed in your family and
Yeah. I think from the beginning, we really saw it as we're a team, we're in this together. Like we both want to be parents and we're going to do everything we can to make this work. So
that's
even like, once we got to medical school, we were, one out of, I think there were only 5 other students that had children. And then the rest of the class, was still single, not even married. And
right.
um, so, a lot of people called us mom and dad. We were like the mom and dad to all of the students
Wow.
because we would host them a lot and we became good friends with all of them. But we decided too with medical school, we're in this together. This is something we're deciding together,
Yeah.
that we're pursuing together. It's not, oh, dad's off at medical school and mom's at home. It's we're doing medical school together, dad's the one that has to go study.
Yeah.
But like my kids and I would go to campus to eat lunch with him a lot, or I would even bring stuff for other students and we would all get together to eat. And, you know, I wanted to get to know his classmates and his professors and not just be on the sidelines.
Wow. That is so great. And as you did that, I mean, what made you be so proactive? I feel like medical school can be so busy.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, just what gave you that thought to really be like get yourself integrated into his school?
So I remember talking to a lot of other women whose husbands had done medical school,
Yeah.
and a lot of them told me things like, "Oh, this is gonna be really hard," and um, yeah, I had one friend who said to me, my sister said that that was the one time she and her husband almost got divorced, and I thought, okay, everyone's saying this is gonna be really hard. What can I do so it's not quite so hard, or at least so I don't just drown.
Oh yeah.
And because I would say the first 6 weeks were the hardest 6 weeks of his entire um, education and even our marriage. Like that was like a really hard time because it was
Yeah.
just this really big transition.
Yeah.
And, people tell you what to expect, but you really don't know until you're in it.
Yeah.
And we had gone from living with his parents to living on our own again. So we no longer had, because when he was doing his master's and I was teaching full time, we had grandma and grandpa there and a couple of my sisters-in-law who lived nearby. So that was really helpful. Um, but now with medical school, we were on our own. And I went and I joined a group that was like the spouses of the students.
Okay.
And so we did a play day at a park one day, and there were wives of students who were in their third year that were there. And I was
Oh.
telling them all my worries and like how things were going at the beginning and that we were scared he was going to fail because it was just so hard. And they said to me, he's not going to fail. He's going to be fine. You guys are just overwhelmed. Like once he figures out his best way to study, he's going to get the hang of it. And um, they also encouraged me. They both said that they had gotten to know the professors well. And I noticed one of them had us over for dinner, and they had a bunch of the other third years over there at her house as well. And they were all talking about some of the professors, and the wife knew all of their names and was like joining in the conversation. And I thought, that's what I want it to be for me. Like, I don't want to just be sitting there all oblivious to what they're talking about.
Hmm.
And so that I think is what gave me the motivation to um, become active in the medical school community and to make sure I wasn't just at home all the time. So,
Yeah, the worst thing you can do, like being in medical school or dental school or those kind of things, it's easy to
mhm,
feel isolated because I mean, for lots of reasons, but it's
mhm,
like you look at your other peers your age and you're like, man, like they've got a house and their husband just has a 9 to 5 and he's home and Saturdays are
mhm,
available to
yeah,
hang out and you're just like and you realize, I mean, I think everyone may come to this realization of like, oh my goodness, like it's just me and him. We're trying to like get through this, but it's like this is a marathon. It's not a hundred meter dash.
yeah,
Because you kind of like have all these realizations but I love how you talked about being, and I think like after your husband, a perfect alma mother is a grandmother because they
mhm,
already love you, they already love your kids, and you were with them, and it
yeah,
feels like you're like you had to be pulled away from that for medical school, and
mhm,
it feels like you're able to kind of create like friends and a support group, even though it wasn't that perfect, grandmother,
yeah,
alma mother situation.
yeah. And you know what? Even during that time, I remember one of my husband's classmates, she was a single mom and
Oh,
she had a little boy. And there was something that came up one day and he couldn't go to preschool. And she was like, oh my gosh, I've got this test. I've got to get to school. Like, what am I going to do? And Evan, my husband, immediately called me and said, hey, like, I don't want to say yes for you, but I do think you'd be willing to do this. This is the situation. And I was like, yeah, of course. So I immediately drove over there to pick up her son,
Oh,
and she was so grateful. And I just remember thinking like it wasn't that big of a deal because I already had my kids at home and I was available. And um, she never like took advantage of me but there were a few other times I was able to watch her son for her.
yeah.
And I think um, that, it's nice when, people are helping you out, but then to also be an alma mother for someone else at the same time.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's so great. It makes a world of difference when you have other medical school families and you can do
Mhm.
that trade-off because you know how it is, like the burnout that happens.
Mhm.
It's
Yeah.
like you have to have that give and take or else, and it's just like, but you do have to be willing to be like, okay, I
Mhm.
had a turn and like now I'm feeling burned out. Can you take my kids? And it's just,
Yeah.
I love seeing that give and take.
Yes.
That is so awesome. Um, and I was also wondering, Um, as he went through medical school, I think you mentioned that you kind of kept up your degree
Yeah.
through it. And like, was that a good outlet for you? Is that kind of what you chose as
Yes.
your
Yeah. So
thing?
I so in um our first year was in Arizona,
Oh,
and that was just a really overwhelming year. And since our kids were so little, I just stayed at home that whole year.
yeah.
However, I did make sure to I I mean, I did a ton of research. I found these a lot of states have programs available for children under 5
Uh-huh.
and free programs. And it doesn't matter your income even. Now being med students, like we did qualify for a lot of things, but
Yeah,
uh,
yeah.
I found like this parenting class that was free that I went to every
Oh,
week, and they provided free babysitting at the class. It was through the county, and I really enjoyed that. And that was something that was really nice to go to every week, and get to know other moms and within our community. And anyway, so that was something that gave me an outlet that first year. And then the second and third year, we moved to the Central Valley in California, where Evan started doing rotations.
okay.
And he and this is one thing I'll say too. My husband has really been someone who has encouraged me to keep up my education
Wow.
and to remind me, like, if you want to go back to work full time, like I will totally support you and we will hire a cook and, a cleaner, but
Wow.
only if that's what you really want. And
Great.
so it was like, well, I don't want to do that full time. I want to be home with the kids when they're young.
Yeah.
Uh, However, I did, when we moved to the Central Valley, I signed up to be a substitute teacher. And then our oldest started preschool there. So I ended up the only classes I ever subbed were for his preschool teacher. But
Oh, nice.
it was great. I loved it. And he never had a problem when I was there as the teacher.
Wow.
And it helped me get a really good relationship with his teacher. And it was good because I only had to if I had subbed full day, I would have had to find someone to watch both my kids all day long. But because I
Right.
was just subbing his preschool class, I was able to just do it while he was there. And then I became really good friends with my next door neighbor, and we would take each other's kids for each other all the time.
Oh,
So
nice.
whenever I went, then she would take my daughter for me while I went and subbed.
Wow. So that worked out great. That is so
Yeah.
cool. Wow. And then I just want to dive right into your um why you started doing foster care, because I know aren't there trainings to become
Yes.
foster
Yeah.
parents, and then you did that in the middle of medical school. I
We
just want
did. Yeah. We're crazy, right?
wow. No,
I
just
would
amazing.
never recommend it to anyone. I would never change what we did. Like it truly, we did it because it felt right and we really prayed about it. And, but as from a practical or logical standpoint, I would never tell anyone to do what we did. So my husband has always wanted to adopt, and I
Wow.
was not against adoption, but originally, I also knew, like, we had Joey right off. And so I knew I had no problems getting pregnant.
Yeah.
So it was kind of like, why adopt when we can have kids so easily on our own?
Yeah.
Um, But my husband just felt really strongly that our family was supposed to grow through adoption.
Wow.
And so over the years, we explored different options, but I was never like fully for it until we moved to that's actually it was his first year of medical school that started getting me thinking
Oh,
because we were in our at our church within our local congregation in our ward. There were quite a few families who had fostered to adopt.
wow.
So that's where that idea started coming to my mind because I had talked with other people about different routes of adoption, but then looking at fostering to adopt, I thought, you know what? In that case, I wouldn't be taking a baby from someone who really wants a baby or
Yeah.
who has struggled to get pregnant. But there are so many kids out there who need a good home. And so then as soon as we got to the Central Valley, that second year of med school, I just decided, you know what? Because we kind of felt like, you know, if we're supposed to adopt, then maybe one day some kids are just going to land in our lap and we're going to adopt them.
Oh,
But I thought of um, the fact that, you know, when you pray for something, you can't just sit there waiting. Like you have to do something about it.
yeah.
And I feel like that's what is an act of faith is actually doing something. And then if it's the wrong thing, you will figure that out along the way and you can change course.
Right.
So I decided, you know what, let's just go sign up to be foster parents. And if it's the right thing, it's going to work out. If it's not, then, you know, it's not going to hurt us. So I remember going to an agency and we decided to go through an agency at first. And I signed up and I told Evan when the classes were. But because of him being in medical school, it did take quite a few months for us to get. It took about from the time we started classes to the final class we took, it took 6 months. Like some people can get it done in 3, but because of his schedule and stuff, it took us 6. And then because we had also lived in 3 different states, the background checks took another 3 months.
Oh, wow.
So we started in October, but we didn't get our like final foster parent license until June. And then we started getting phone calls right away, but we just never felt great about any of the calls. And I felt so guilty every time I said no.
Oh,
Thought, why am I not saying yes to these kids? You know, but we had to keep in count our own 2 children that we already had and how it was going to affect them.
right.
So it was for more than over a year of I'm trying to think. I'd have to look at a calendar to figure out
Yeah.
when, but we, during that time, during the next year, we decided to get pregnant again because we thought, what if we don't get kids?
Oh,
And because he was but at this point, he was now entering his 3rd year of med school. So it was like, because they told us the time frame, like once you get
oh,
kids, then it's going to be about 6 months before they terminate parental rights, and then another 6 months before you,
oh,
you know, can process the adoption. But that it all depends on the agency or the county or the case.
wow.
So you don't know how long it's actually going to take, and also depends on where they are in the how long they've been in the foster system.
Oh, interesting.
So we were like, okay, so if we get kids now, what if we don't get to end up adopting them? Or the fact that we're moving, it's going to get too close. Like we may not even be able to take them with us. So we decided to get pregnant again. And I would say too, we did get calls for 6 different sibling sets that we said yes to, but we were not picked.
Oh, interesting. Hmm.
As with the agency, the way it worked was we could adopt kids from anywhere in the state of California.
Wow.
And so when you get that phone call, it doesn't mean that those kids are in your own county. They could be anywhere in the state, and they're trying to find adoptive parents for these kids. So then they reach out to families that they think would be a good match, and then they end up choosing one of the sets of parents that says yes.
Wow.
So out of those 6 different sets, we were never picked. And then all the other calls too, I ended up saying no. And then, um, so after a year of like having finished all those classes and stuff, we decided to switch to the county. So we had been with an
Oh.
agency, and then we decided, you know what, let's go through the county, because the agency had really spoken poorly of the county and said, don't go with the county. Like, and anyway, we realized when we talked with the county, we didn't see anything wrong with it. And we had met a few other people from our church who had actually adopted through the county.
Oh,
So we were like, why don't we try going through the county?
wow.
And we were lucky. We ended up switching our license right before COVID hit.
Wow.
So if we had not done it right then, we would have had to, the whole process would have been paused for us, and we wouldn't have been able to get kids during COVID because they weren't certifying any new foster parents during the start of COVID. So
Wow.
thankfully we didn't have to we only had to do like one additional training, but then because we were already certified, they were able to just transfer our paperwork over. And the agency, when I told them we had prayed about it, then they were super understanding about why we switched.
Wow.
Which
Interesting.
we did. We did pray about it, and we felt good about switching. And then it was 6 months later that I then got a phone call for our 2 sons.
Wow.
And with that phone call, it was different. And that's the thing too. I said to lots of people who had fostered or adopted and said, how am I going to know?
Oh.
And they're like, you'll know. I
Wow.
said, I don't believe you because I have not felt that feeling yet.
Yeah. Yeah. You had
But then
done
when I did get the call for my sons, it wasn't like a hard, like, yes, you need to do this. But in my heart, I like felt, I think we could actually make this work. And it was Providence too that I happened to be at the beach that day with my 2 younger ones in my happy place. Like, I love the beach. That is my place that I go to like relax and be happy.
Oh, yeah.
And so I was sitting in the sand watching them play in the waves. And I got a
Oh,
phone call from a social worker saying, we've got these 2 little boys that are 4 and 2. They need a new home. Are you willing to take them? And I thought, I think this could actually work. And so I said, and that's the other thing I forgot to share. When we switched to the county, we decided to foster because our former social worker had said, if you just stay on the adoption list, it's going to take a long time to get kids. But if you're
right.
willing to foster first, you're more likely to get the kids. Like, they might be taken from you, but you also have a higher chance of them staying with you.
Wow.
So we decided to foster. And so when I got the call for them too, I also knew we may not get to keep these boys, but it felt right.
Wow.
And so I called Evan up really quick and I said, I think I want to say yes. And he was like, if you feel good about it, I'm going to support you. It's your decision. You're going to be the one, at home with these kids.
Right. Yeah.
And so I called the social worker back within 10 minutes and was like, yes, we'll take them. And I said, don't you dare call anyone else. Like, I ended up, and I said, who's like their social worker? Because there are a lot of different social workers within
Oh, yeah.
the foster system. They're the ones that like show up at emergency situations. They're the ones that are assigned to children. They're the ones assigned to foster parents. They're the ones in charge of adoption. So anyway, I wanted to like reach out to the other social workers that were on this case and say, don't let these boys go to anyone else. I am taking them.
Wow.
So yeah, we had 2 weeks to prepare and then they moved in with us. And then 2 weeks after that, I gave birth to our youngest.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Wow. That is quite
and that was it. That was another thing that was like, okay, I was supposed to get that phone call at the beach where I was relaxed and happy,
yeah,
not stressed, following, having my kids run around Costco or something. And also getting that call before Melinda was born because, I felt I could do it with the 5 of them. And if it had been after she was born, I would not have been in a good like mental state to say yes. And I would have felt overwhelmed and probably said no. So.
Wow. So my dad always said that growing up, timing is everything.
Yes.
That's what I still.
Yeah. And you know what? It was a huge blessing that it was during COVID because during that time, Evan was doing online rotations. So
Yes.
she was home quite a bit during that first year that we had our boys. So
That's great.
he also left me for a month after Melinda was born because the Navy had sent him to do a rotation. And so I
Oh,
was by myself with 5 kids, and one was a newborn of only 1 month, and two were not, they were our foster sons that we weren't even sure would stay with us long term. So it was a crazy time, but
wow.
we had a close friend from medical school who was amazing. And she came uh, every night, except for the weekends, because I had family. A couple of my sisters and then my mother-in-law and sister-in-law each took different weekends to come and help me while Evan was away that month. But then during the week, this friend from medical school, she specifically made sure she had a rotation where she would be off in the evenings, and she would come and get my kids to bed and vacuum for me and fold the laundry and do the dishes. She was amazing.
Oh my God, it makes me want to cry. Wow. That is so amazing. How do you feel like she kind of like figured out, I mean, your needs? Like it's just kind of obvious, like, I mean, bedtime with, I mean, I only have two, so bedtime
Mhm.
with four plus a
Mhm.
newborn, like that's a lot for just one person. It's so much,
Yeah.
such a whirlwind. So how do you feel like did she just know, or was there really good
Well,
communication with
she
her?
knew my kids really well. They kind of
Okay.
looked at her as an aunt. Like we had been
Oh,
together in Arizona and we all came to California together to do rotations.
oh, okay.
And we had become good friends, and we had her over quite a bit for like dinner. And she and my husband they were like study partners and would study together a lot. And so I think it helped that we had become really good friends. And um, she wasn't just Evan's friend; she's my really good friend too. So
Ah,
it was, and I also credit it to like that first year, like she went through a couple hard things, and Evan made sure to like really reach out to her. And
oh.
not that you do nice things so that other people will do stuff for you, but it does, in the end, it does always pay off to be kind and helpful to those around you.
Yeah, because it's like you just think like at least I did, but before medical school, it's just like, yep, he'll take classes the first year, I mean 2 years, and then
Mhm.
there's the clinical, and then there's the really, the
Mhm.
primary when you're a primary student, and you just kind of think like that's what I'm gonna do during medical school. And
Mhm.
you just don't realize that there's gonna be you might have deaths in the family, you might have a few kids, like you might have
Mhm.
that you can't plan like the big things that happen, but you can get through it, but you like you can't do it alone,
Yeah.
with those big changes on top
Yeah.
of your schoolwork and rotations.
Yeah.
So, wow, that is amazing. I feel like it's it takes some vulnerability to be brave enough to receive like the help you really need. And
Mhm.
you have to know someone pretty well. It's like that. I love that story in general conference of like someone that dropped, was it ice cream? Like some sisters dropped off some ice cream to someone who is
Yeah.
totally allergic to ice cream. I know, to
Uh-huh.
dairy and to chocolate, but she's like, thanks. It's like just totally
Yeah.
not what you need.
Yes.
And that's
Yes.
I think that has stuck with me as I've like thought about
Mhm.
my own needs. It's like with when people ask like, "How can I help you?" And I didn't really know what to say, but I
Mhm.
really needed help, and it had to be an internal thing like, "Well, I just need a walk by myself." That would
Mhm.
really help me, you know.
Yeah.
And you just have to know your own needs to be able to ask for that.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, and I would say I feel like I have gotten better at being willing to ask for help, as I have had more kids and as we
Oh,
have, moved away from family. And so even during that time, there were a couple days where my friend wasn't there to help me out, and I was going to drive down with all of my kids to go visit Evan
oh,
because we were in the Central Valley and he was down at Camp Pendleton. So it was like a 5 hour drive, maybe six. Anyway, so I was packing up 5 kids in the car by myself and trying to get the house cleaned up, and I was so overwhelmed. And
wow.
I reached out to women from church and just sent a text to all of them saying, "Hey, if any of you are available, I just need some help right now. And there were four different ladies that showed up, and one of
Wow.
them cooked dinner, another one cleaned the house, another one came the next morning to help me pack and get the kids in the car so we could get on the road.
Oh,
Like it was so kind, and I loved, yeah, it was a really like supportive ward, and it was great to like be with all the and they were there with us through that journey of fostering our sons, and then we moved because Evan started residency at Camp Pendleton
okay.
the next year. But then when our boys were adopted, because we got them in the Central Valley in California, then we had to go back up to the courts up there for the adoption. And so we were able to like celebrate with all of those people who had been there to support us through that time.
Wow. That is amazing that they all just pulled and helped you through that. And how is I feel like you were a really important allo mother and became their mother, like your two sons. And how did you integrate them into your family and into your heart? And like, what was that journey for you?
Hmm, that's a good question. I think I remember just going into it like from the beginning, deciding that whoever we get, they're meant to be our children.
Yeah.
And so it wasn't a matter of, oh, if we adopt them or if it works out.
Oh,
Because what if you have a child that's born to you who has things that they struggle with? Are you just going to call a social worker up and say, hey, this isn't working out? We're going to send them off, you know?
yeah.
So for me and Evan, that was never even an option. Like if
Wow.
there's something hard that we're facing, we're going to work through this. We're not going to call the social worker and send them back.
Yeah.
And now I know that there's special circumstances where that can't always work for people.
Yeah.
But in our case, we decided like we're going to make this work.
Wow.
And um, if you've ever seen the comedy Instant Family, like we've definitely had some Instant Family moments.
I haven't
And
often.
it's not, we had a honeymoon period, and like our younger one called me mom from day one, whereas the older one didn't, and it took him more time to adjust.
Mm.
And at first for me too, like, they didn't immediately feel like my children as far as the like attachment you feel toward your kids.
Oh, uh-huh.
But I did still feel a love for them. And um I think of, the series Love Comes Softly, and it does as you get to know them and as you open up your heart to them and you are willing to do things to bond with them, then, it helps you grow closer. And you know what? I remember why I was so overwhelmed that day when I called up the women from church. Um, it wasn't just the fact that like I needed help, but that same day I got a call from the social worker saying that um, their mom wanted to visit. And it was the first time that she had ever reached out since we'd gotten the boys.
Wow.
And up until then, I had always thought, like, oh, of course, if she wants to visit, like, we'll make that work. And, because she has the right to visit them
Yeah.
supervised. And, but when I got that call, it wasn't until then that I realized how much I already loved them. And I thought, I just started crying and like thought they can, like, she cannot take them.
Wow.
Now she ended up never following through. Sadly, during the entire time that they were our foster sons, she never did visit them.
Oh, really? Wow.
Um, which, if she had, then I would have made the effort to get to know her. Um, we did, thankfully, we have a great relationship with one of the grandmas and an aunt and even an older half sister. And so we've been able to build that relationship as well. And she's become a grandma to all five of our kids
Oh.
and told us that like if I'm going to remain in these boys' lives, I want to be a grandma to all of your children, not just to them.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, so I think um I just looked at it as these boys need a safe loving home. And it's not always easy, you know, they have hiccups, and it's, you know, just like raising any child, you're gonna um, have rough times and great times. And but overall, it's been an amazing journey. And I will say it's like been, I have grown so much. We've had them now for over 3.5 years,
Wow.
and uh, it has, I've had to make a lot of changes, but it's been good. It really puts into perspective um, the your weaknesses and your strengths and what you need to work on, and the fact that when things aren't working with your kids, it's usually not your kids that are the problem. You're usually the problem.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's a very
Unfortunately.
humbling experience
Yeah.
to realize that and to be willing to make those changes.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. Yeah. Motherhood it's actually an internal, journey, and your kids get to watch it, aren't they? Like,
Yeah.
but you get to work it out together, and then you become
Mhm.
a stronger family,
Yeah.
through those. Yeah. Oh, that's amazing. Well, thanks. Yeah. Thanks for sharing that whole
Mhm.
journey. So, what's the best advice you would give to someone, or even maybe yourself, before you went through medical school and or master's and medical school? Is there like, what would you say to someone that's just right at the beginning of their
Mhm.
journey?
I would let them know, like, you can do this. You've got this, and you're stronger than you think. And to not give up, but to also realize, you know what helped me at the beginning? I remember talking with my sister-in-law when Ev and I were really overwhelmed,
Yeah.
and she said to me, "What's the worst thing that's going to happen?" And I said, "He's going to fail." And she said, "Okay, so he fails. What then?" And I said, "Well, I've got my degree. I could go back to teaching full time." And I said, "And he has his master's, like he could get a job in that area."
Yeah.
And she was like, "Okay." And she said, "Have you told him this?" And I said, "No." And so I remember when I did tell him, like, "Hey, just so you know, like, because there was one night he was really overwhelmed as he was studying. And I said,
Yeah.
I just want you to know, if you fail, I'm right here beside you, and we're going to be fine." And I remember him looking up at me like, "Are you serious? Like, you're okay with that?" And I think when we both like verbalized that, it let off so much of the pressure.
Wow.
And after that, like things really started to get better. And um, so, yeah. So if for some reason it doesn't work out for you, that's okay too.
Yeah.
Like I said, you have to make a decision and move forward with it. And just because something doesn't work out doesn't mean you were wrong to try it. And
Yeah.
it doesn't mean it was bad, you know. You just make a change and do something different then in that case. Now, thankfully, we did end up making it all the way.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
remember like it was awesome. All 5 kids walked across the stage with him at his graduation.
Oh, wow.
And just that feeling of like, we actually did it. We made it. You know, there is
Wow.
light at the end of the tunnel. You will get there. So just remember, when it is hard, like, it's going to be okay. And, you know, reach out, get to know those in your community, whether it's within the school where you're attending,
Yeah.
or your neighbors, or your church community, or, you know, for me, it's always been, I remember my mom saying to me once when we moved, "Don't expect anyone to come up and be your friend."
Oh,
She said, "If you want friends, you have to go out and make them."
wow.
And so I've always thought of that every time we've moved. Like I'm very proactive in getting to know our neighbors and
Yeah.
joining, you know, different groups, or getting to know the other moms on my kids' sport teams or at their school. And I've made some really great friendships through that.
Yeah. Oh, that is great advice. It's sometimes in the middle of medical school. I mean, because you've already done a bachelor's, like you know what 4 years feels like, but when you do it again and a master's and a residency,
Mm-hmm.
like it feels like
Mm-hmm.
it's never gonna end.
Yeah.
Especially met the medical school, at least for us, like I was like, this is actually no, the master's degree. I was like, this is never gonna end. And then
Uh-huh.
but it does. And like that graduation, I remember our medical school graduation day. I mean, it was a perfect day. And you
Mhm.
feel so relieved. And you're like, wow, like we did it.
Yeah.
We got through the exams, and we,
Yeah.
and it's it's a huge accomplishment but really it's like who you've become. I think that I was worried about that at the beginning of medical school. I was like, okay, who do I want to be at the end of the 4 years? Like I was really trying to be like, how could I become something? And you just do, you just like, as you work together and as you build your family culture with those young kids, you just become a different person by the end.
Yeah.
And it ends.
Yeah.
So awesome.
Yeah. I lost my train of thought, but I think we're okay.
Well, it comes back. Well, the last question I love asking is if an alum mother knocked on your door like tomorrow morning and said, what can I do? And you just were able to give them one thing that would be really helpful, what would it be?
For me right now, it would be, take my kids to do something fun because I'm prepping for our move.
Oh, right.
I have a lot to get done before I move.
Yeah.
And you know what? I have already kind of done that. I've reached out to some people who are going to come and help me, over these next few weeks with kind of prepping for our move.
Wow. See, oh, that's awesome. Good for you. Oh, that's great. Well, is there any last thing you want to share before we wrap up?
I just want to thank you for giving me this opportunity. It was great to see you again and to chat.
Yes.
And thank you for letting me share my story. I hope that it will help other women who are either pursuing their higher education or supporting their spouse in their education.
Oh, yes. Yeah, you have given amazing tools and insights. So, yes, thank you for your time. It has been wonderful. Great. Well, yeah, thanks everyone for joining, and we'll see you next time. Thanks so much for listening in today. I hope that you got ideas of how to improve your overall well-being and life as a mother. If you have a friend who could use a lift, please share. See you next time.